Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change Minister Pearnel Charles Jr. says his team is working with relative agencies and ministries, both locally and abroad, to mitigate climate change. Speaking at a recent JIS Think tank, Minister Charles shared the outcome of a recent ministerial meeting in the United Kingdom.
The recent ministerial meeting fleshed out focal points to be addressed in the upcoming 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP26, which will be held in Glasgow, November 1 to 12, 2021. Portfolio Minister Pearnel Charles says this smaller meeting gave island states an opportunity to place issues that affect the Caribbean on the table.
Issues that relate to our vulnerability, issues relating to climate finance, issues relating to loss and damage, adaptation, mitigation, and implementation of the Paris Agreement.
The Paris Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. It brings all 196 signatory nations into a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and adapt to its effects. The key goal is keeping global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Minister Charles says some of the key points of the Paris Agreement were discussed at the meeting.
And then the technical teams closed off the meeting on the third day, going into the more granular details of the policies and the programs that are needed to support our efforts to create a framework for all of the countries to be able to achieve our objectives, and to identify how we are going to work together across the globe to tackle the devastating impacts of climate change, which we are feeling more intensely and more frequently, particularly for us as small states that are vulnerable because of our geographical location as well as the small economies that we have.
He says Jamaica has been consistent in playing its role on the global stage in the development of strategies to mitigate against climate change. He furthers that a lot has been done locally as well.
And we have been consistently playing our role in terms of mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation being what we are doing in our own jurisdiction to minimize the impact that we make negatively in terms of emissions. So it has to do with introduction of renewables and having ambitious targets, which we have updated our NDC and raised our targets, our ambitious targets to make sure we do what we can to reduce emissions. So that's mitigation. And adaptation, on the other hand, is building the capacity now to be able to have the infrastructure that will withstand the impacts of climate change.
In order to deflect the worst impacts of climate change, scientists have highlighted the need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Minister Charles says human behavior continues to be a challenge.
Our choices are leading to these outcomes. And so we are saying to countries across the world that if we are going to have any intention of keeping global warming to well below 2 degrees, and as we have aimed for 1.5 degrees, then we must adapt, we must change, we must introduce the kind of renewable technology that relinquishes the hold that we have now in terms of fossil fuels. We must raise our ambitions. If we do not do so, look on the intergovernmental panel and the report that has been put out. It is a glaring alert to all countries, and Jamaica, for one, is taken seriously. We will be ramping up our communication campaign. We will be ramping up our interaction across all stakeholder groups to make sure that everybody understands the importance, plays their part, and continues to be vocal, so that as we play our part as a small island developing state, we continue to lead in ensuring that other countries play their part. This is something which cannot be addressed in isolation.
The Paris Agreement was signed at COP21 in Paris on December 12, 2015, and entered into force on World Earth Day, November 4, 2016. The Paris Agreement requires all parties to put forward their best efforts through nationally determined contributions. This includes requirements that all parties report regularly on their emissions and on their implementation efforts. For the news on PBCJ, I'm Simone Absalom Gale.